This is Polyamory Weekly, tales from the front of responsible non-monogamy from a pansexual, kink-friendly point of view. A warning for our under 18 listeners. This is an adult-oriented podcast about really lascivious things, like communication and honesty in relationships. If you're under 18 and looking for upfront advice and answers to questions about sex, please visit scarletteen.com.
This is Polyamory Weekly, episode 551 for March 11th, 2018. Coming up on today's show, dating the strong silent type. That's coming up on today's show. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Minx.
And co-host Lusty Guy. I told you she would be back. I know you were worried. And here she is.
I was worried. That was not fun. Anyway, back in the hosting seat, and you're back in the co-host seat.
I am. It's like old times. Pilot to co-pilot.
Yay! And it's also like old times because we're actually dealing with the listener question.
Indeed.
Which we've had so many fabulous guests on lately that we haven't been addressing as many listener questions. I kind of miss it.
Well, you know, it's been fun lining up all the interviews, and it's given me something to do and keep me busy behind the scenes to make sure there's always someone in the queue. But it is good to circle back to a listener comment and involve the people who are listening.
Yeah, indeed. Before we get to Copper's question, however, let's pay some bills, as they say.
Are you planning on opening up your relationship? The University of Utah Relationship Decisions Lab is looking for participants in monogamous relationships who are currently considering opening up their relationship to take a survey. We are looking for individuals who have never opened up and individuals who have opened up in the past but are currently with one partner and are planning on opening up again. This study will examine how people choose to open their relationships and what their experiences of this relationship transition look like. If you or anyone you know fits our qualifications, we invite you to take our survey. You can find our survey at www.relationshipdecisions.org. Once there, click on the Participants tab and then on the Open Relationship Project link. Not only will you be furthering science, but you will be entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Again, the link is www.relationshipdecisions.org. Click on the Participants tab and the Open Relationship Project link.
So if you've heard this spot before and thought, oh yeah, maybe I'll do that, but you haven't done it yet, this might be a good time to check it out if you meet the criteria, of course. Now, the next person you're going to hear from is a good friend of ours.
Ruby, yay, Ruby. And just, you know, a little hint, you might be hearing a little more of Ruby in the coming months. That's all I'm going to say.
Hey folks, what's up? Have you heard about Poly Dallas Millennium Symposium? The 4th annual symposium is July 13th through the 15th in Dallas, Texas. You know what else? This year's theme is Rewriting the Rules. We talk about loving and living in 2018. Join us this summer in Dallas. More details at pdm2018.com. Peace.
And we can vouch for the fact that Poly Dallas Millennium is a conference that pretty much every poly activist or practitioner needs to go to at least once in their lives.
We had a wonderful time there. It's an amazing show that has a unique perspective and does something really needed in the community.
Yeah, putting forth people of color and centering the conference around those, really, if you're not a person of color, is a unique experience. And actually, I think it actually is also a unique experience if you are a person of color, from what we heard.
You know, as a matter of fact, yes.
Yeah. And our question this week was called in from Copper.
Hi, Minx. My name is Copper, and I live in Alaska in a rural area. I really love listening to your show because it makes me feel connected to a larger polyamorous community, which isn't something I can find where I live here. Because of where I live, I do a lot of educating people that I date about relationship structures, ethical non-monogamy, and polyamory, because it's usually the first time people have heard of it. I recently met a guy who I really, really fell for and felt this very intense connection to. He was a few hours away, and we hooked up a few times. And while he was passing through the town where I live recently, he stopped and visited me on really short notice. We ended up having sex, and he met my partner who I live with and saw the place where I grew up, and this was all like in 3 hours. And it was a really intense interaction, and it really threw me for a loop. I also had an abortion about a year ago, and it's been on my mind as I'm starting to be sexual with new folks again, and I shared this with him. I've had pretty high expectations for the level of communication that I expected of him. Being highly communicative about emotions isn't really like part of the culture here. It's not really like the way that men in Alaska tend to interact. So looking back, I think this was like a lot to ask of him. But being highly communicative about emotions is the culture of polyamory. So I think I freaked him out, and he's kind of been stringing me along for the last month or so. I'm going to be in his area for work in a few weeks, for a few weeks. And it's a really small community there too, so I think I'll probably run into him. My question is, how do I reconcile the culture of polyamory, which seems to be like a lot about communication and openness and like verbally communicating your emotions, with the less verbal, less communicative culture of the place where I live? I think that sharing of emotions can come off as like oversharing here and can really freak people out. And with all of this, I'm wondering if there's ever a time where it works to pursue someone. I felt a huge connection with him, but I'm not quite sure how to pursue him without just like clearly stating that I'm interested in exactly where I'm at, which I think is coming off as oversharing. This is kind of a pattern that I found myself in with these men who are less communicative. And you have Lusty Guy have shared that like the best guarantee of success is partner selection, and selecting people who are comfortable and good with polyamory. There's not really any polyamorous community where I live, and it's a huge effort to try to communicate with people in the type of ways that I'm observing is frequently used by polyamorous, which is not familiar.
And sorry we cut you off there. There is a 3-minute limit, I think, on Google Voice. So
Sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, you might have to be a little bit more concise. But I think we kind of got the gist of the question.
Well,
right?
I hope so. I think there was a couple of questions in there, probably.
Yeah, I think there were a few questions. It's what I took away is the main question was, is it okay to date somebody who really doesn't communicate very well? Because that's just all there is. and I like him.
Yeah, oh, yeah, strong connection.
Yes.
Strong.
Hey, that was a mocking tone.
I'm sorry. It was kind of a mocking tone. It's one of my biases, and I own it, that women, when they feel a sexual attraction to somebody, say they have a deep connection. They don't just say, oh my God, I want to knock boots with that person.
Okay, to be fair, she didn't say deep. She said strong.
I know. I'm owning it. I'm owning it. It's my cynicism. It's my assholery.
Yeah. Where do we start?
Well, okay, so since I'm on a roll with being an asshole, let's just give it another whack. One of the things that I would like to address in your call-in is the notion of what poly community or poly culture is and dictates in the norms therein. The norms of your local culture, merging those two and how they relate to you finding partners. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter what poly culture does. It doesn't matter what your piece of rural culture does. When it comes time to finding somebody to date, what matters is what you need and what works for you. If the, quote, strong silent type or somebody who has a hard time dealing with their emotions works for you, and by the way, I hate to break this to you, but that describes most men in America, not just Alaska.
And it's a pretty flattering way to describe people who are unable to communicate their emotions, if I say.
Many men in the States, in our Western culture, are estranged from their emotional selves and experience it only most fully when they're with a woman that they have a strong connection with. In my experience, and that's a level of psychobalance.
Did you just say men can have a strong connection with a woman?
Well, they have to. Without that, we are completely estranged from ourselves. In any case, the question isn't how do these cultures merge? What do I do with the expectations of these cultures? The question is, what do I need? What do you need? Mm-hmm. And how do you get it? So really, I would encourage you to feel free to be an anthropologist in those cultural areas and say, oh, this is what the poly community says, and this is what my little community says. And then be a self-anthropologist and say, this is what I need. And go for that latter one.
Yeah, that's kind of what I felt too. It seems like you're fretting and have a lot of anxiety about what he might or might not be okay with. Girl, you do you. You lay it out there. I mean, you're never going to know if he really likes you or if he can handle it unless you actually just say, look, this is me. This is who I am. This is what I need. Maybe you are afraid that he'll think you're oversharing, but you're not going to know until you share.
Now, maybe your answer, by the way, to that question of what I need is, hell with it. I need to have a good time, knock boots, and I don't care if he talks or not. In fact, I just soon put a ball gag at him. Great. Whatever your answer to that question is, that's okay.
Well, that's true. I mean, there was a period where I dated a guy because he had great hair and great weed. I knew he wasn't poly. He was monogamous. I knew he wasn't going to be okay with poly. But fuck it. I wanted somebody who was into me and who wanted to have sex and who had great weed. And that, frankly, I wasn't going to have to deal with their fucking partner being jealous and insecure with me. I needed that at that time. And, we dated for, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so. Might even have been a little longer until he freaked out when he met my poly friends and then literally never spoke to me again.
Scared him away.
I totally did. Like, he'd heard about my poly friends. He hosted a birthday party for me at his house. Where there's not a lot of kink. We didn't bring in equipment or anything, but there was some, kink and spanking and whatnot. He literally never spoke another word to me again after that.
Terrified.
It was like, never returned a call, nothing. I had shit at his house. I'm like, okay, I guess he's keeping all the shit because I am not going to be able to go there to get the shit. So
that's funny. You terrified the poor guy. Now,
or offended. I mean, he might have been angry. I don't know. But I knew that he wasn't going to be able to handle it. And, frankly, it was a good ride for me. I was a little off-putting that we couldn't at least, sort of put the period at the end of the sentence. But
you enjoyed the prose.
But I enjoyed the sentence, and I didn't expect an exclamation point. I didn't expect a novel. I knew it was just going to be a couple of sentences, and that was fine.
So, to circle back to now another thing that I'm hearing in your message, if it were me, somebody who blew me off for a little while and who I couldn't communicate with would not be somebody who I would pursue.
Yeah.
You do you, as Minx said. And I also get the rural areas, and I also get, being in particular far up north. There's actually a little digression.
He's a country boy.
I am. I just saw a documentary not too long ago on people who stay year round at the Air Force Base in Antarctica. There's like 200 or 300 people down there. There's not many that stay there year round. And there was an interview with one of the women who runs a store down there or something. And she said, yeah, when you come down here, another woman will pull you aside and tell you, the odds are good, but the goods are odd. And I love that quote. So I understand you're in a rural area where you feel like you don't have a lot to pick from. Now, that feeling of scarcity can create the reality that it's there even when it's not necessarily sometimes. So I would caution you a little bit about that. But I understand that it is different than a rural area. And there are times, from my experience, when I just so desperately wanted a bit of human contact, sex, and affection, even though I knew that it was going to be hell as soon as everybody sobered up. I chose to take that moment and get what those needs met. So you've got to balance things out for yourself where you're at, independent, again, of any considerations of community expectations, setting aside expectations of morality. I'm gonna say that morality and ethics always come into play. You want to consider those. But other than that, don't feel like you have to process because everybody says they do in the poly community.
I'll second that. I mean, fuck poly community standards. Do you need the communication? Do you need somebody who will open up? Do you need somebody who's not going to make you afraid to share your life? Now, personally, I'm also with Lusty Guy. I have dated somebody that I was afraid to share too much with because he was, frankly, so cute. Oh my God, he was so pretty. And he played jazz guitar and rode a motorcycle.
Oh.
And yeah. And I was just really afraid of losing him. And so I actually held back a lot. And of course, it didn't last very long. And he got really quiet, basically didn't talk like we would go out, but he wouldn't really say anything or talk to me. And so I knew it. And then, big surprise, 2 dates later, he's like, yeah, I'm seeing someone, we're breaking up. And I'm like, not like I didn't know. It still sucked. But, that was an experience for me, learning that I personally do not want to date someone that I can't share my shit with.
Mm-hmm.
What was it? Who was it that said, if you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best?
I don't know, but I've seen lots of variations of it, and I like it.
Oh, I just looked it up. It is Marilyn Monroe. I thought that it was, but I didn't want to say for sure. If you can't handle me at my worst, then you sure as hell don't deserve me at my best.
Great line.
Yeah. But also, again, I will second what Lusty Guy said, that, if you just need Mr. Right now, and if you're going to be leaving or going to another community soon, and that works for you, like it did with me and the man who I nicknamed in my journal Confirmed Bachelor, then, go to. It's about what you need.
Absolutely. Just have your eyes open and be very careful that if what you are setting yourself up for is an occasional drive-by thing, fall into the sheets and not see you for a couple months, if that's what you're setting yourself up for, then you better be really careful that you don't want call me every night and talk to you regularly and share deep things. Yeah. You got to understand what you want and make sure that that jibes with what's available.
Or if, like me, it's what you want now, and in a couple of months, you're going to be like, yeah, that's not good enough. I need something else. That's okay, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think that about wraps it up for today's show.
And a nice, pretty bow. Yeah. Shower time.
Well, we want to thank everybody who donates to the show, our awesome Poly Weekly Playmates, our subscribers. We are a free resource. We've helped hundreds of thousands of people navigate their introduction to and continued success with polyamory. And your donations help keep the podcast free for everybody inside and outside the community. If you have questions or comments or feedback, you can do like Copper did. Call 802-505-POLY. Leave us a message. You can email polyweekly@gmail.com. If you want to book us to speak at your event, or maybe for us to give a Skype seminar at your next event, then email lustyguy@polyweekly.com. Thanks for listening, and remember,
it's not all about the sex.